And you and I were talking in the green room before about a different take on disability. And people tend to take a binary, often visual view of what defines disability. Like if they look at a person and they're like, oh, they're not disabled, or they have this, you're disabled or you're not. And that's an antiquated view because one thing I definitely want to leave people's mind with is that.
Welcome to the Wheel With It podcast with your host, Devon. Let's get into the episode.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Wheel With It. I am your host, Devon Wieters, and today is one of my favorites we've ever done because we have an amazing inventor on the podcast. His name is Doug Katz. He is a disabled veteran who's invented a adaptive knife, and we talk about a lot about adaptive design, why we need adaptive products, why adaptive products are good for everybody. So I really love this one, and I hope you will too. Here's my conversation with Doug Katz. This one is probably going to be one of my favorites because we have Douglas Katz, who's an amazing inventor who invented a super cool adapted knife. And he has some very good points about disability stuff. Thank you for being here, Douglas.
Thank you,
tell
Devon.
us about yourself.
Well, first I want to say thank you because you are the first disabled host podcast that we've been on. So this is a first for us, and I've been on about 35 podcasts, I think, something like that. So I love what you're doing, and I think there's got to be more out there about it. So my story, I grew up in Michigan, went into the Army through West Point, graduated there in 93, and everybody who goes there has an engineering background. So I think that did provide some degree of shaping my journey. Did 5 years in the Army in the artillery. So one of my disabilities, I can't hear very good. Unfortunately, my hearing aids right now are in the shop. Did that until 1998, and I got out and was a corporate guy for most of my career. I was recently in the lending industry, and I am a disabled vet. I have disabilities that are both recognized by the VA and some that the Army just plain contributed to that I didn't have a service connection with. My upper extremity ones being some of those that cause issues. And I'm an incurable hobbyist as well. And my wife had gotten me a bladesmithing class, and that I took to it. But at a certain time, I also love to cook. And at a certain point, my arm, right before I got my shoulder rebuilt, I was having a lot of issues. I couldn't cook. I couldn't really make a traditional knife. So I was sitting out in my shop trying to figure out what to do, and a circular saw blade was sitting there, and I use those for experimentation on different things sometimes. And that's when the NuLu was born, out of my own need and my own disabilities of not being able to use a traditional knife in a manner that was comfortable or effective.
That is unbelievable. So tell us more about exactly what your disabilities are, and if you don't mind, are they combat related or are they just training related?
I've got cognitively, I do have ADHD. I got diagnosed late in life, and actually, for me, I think it's a feature, not a bug, because in the entrepreneurial world, like with what we're doing, it allows me to be very in the moment and deal with a lot of issues. Most of them are physical. I've got bad knees and ankles. I've got upper extremity issues, and actually one of the ones that I am rated with the VA is migraines and issues with my breathing. They screwed up I guess they call it rhinoplasty, to solve a problem that made problems worse. So I have terrible.
I'm sorry.
You know what? It's not their fault. It's funny. My middle child, my middle one was like, why didn't you sue them? And I'm like, because operations don't always work the way you expected. So most of my stuff is physical, and it's mostly stuff that is, I just endure it, right? I just work through the problem. But at that point, I just couldn't use my right arm real well. So it really became a in my face, needs based, hey, you know what? I want him to cook, right? Where it went from there is I showed it to people. And many entrepreneurs or aspiring ones will say, oh, don't show anybody anything. They're going to steal it. It's not true. And that got me down the road of getting all my partners who are all like me. They're all over 50. They're all beat up. Many of them have upper extremity issues as well. So as a team, coming up with the vision of better adaptive design wasn't that difficult because I think everybody really understood the use case. If you're 25, you just don't get it the same way.
Yes.
Unless you're 25 and disabled.
Unless you're 25 and disabled. That's
Right.
what I was about to say.
Right.
So tell us the process of actually coming up with this knife.
I wish it was more deliberate, right? It was a spark, but a spark that was informed by knowing how to make knives. So I had that circular saw blade sitting there, and there's a knife called the NuLu, and a shout out to indigenous cultures. The Inuit culture was the one who chiefly used the ulu, and you actually see similar knives in cultures around the world where it's more of like half moon shape and a handle above it. And it works really well. If you know anyone who ever went to Alaska, they probably bought one. But there was this aspect of why does it work better? And it's just circular geometry. It's thinking of if you have a linear knife, and for the folks who can see it, I'm holding up, this is one I'm making for a friend. It's not a kitchen knife, but you've got the blade and the handle, the control and the cutting area are linear. So if I'm trying to cut, it puts force on my hand, my wrist, my elbow, my shoulder. It's just not a good cutting experience. With the NuLu, it's circular. So if you think of where you grip it, and you can use it either way as the center of a circle, and then the arc along the outside of a circle being the cutting area, geometry, any one of the radii from the center to the end are going to be where you get great transfer of force because it's direct transfer, right? Like an arrow, it's like a vector. So with the NuLu, people can use it however they want to. So you and I would use it very differently. And where we came up with this is a concept of force transfer geometry and looking at the two different geometries of like, how does a line versus a circle transfer that and how does it affect your body? But a bigger part of it, I think, came with it's all not worthwhile if the market's not big enough. You can't commercialize it. And you and I were talking in the green room before about a different take on disability. And people tend to take a binary, often visual view of what defines disability. Like if they look at a person and they're like, oh, they're not disabled. Or they have this, you're disabled or you're not. And that's an antiquated view because most things are on a spectrum or scale, right? Autism is on a scale. Everything you look at tends to be on a scale and not binary. So why should
palsy is a spectrum. So right. There are people that you will look at it and not even know they had it, and there are 100%. People like me, and then there are people worse off than me. So
that's exactly. And when you look at it a different way, so what we came up with is a concept that we call the ability curve, where on a scale of 1 to 10, as defined by, and it's really meant for design, because if you're looking at a task, and in the Army, my fellow veterans and I always learn task, condition, and standards, right? So there's 3 things that define whether you can accomplish that on a pass-fail. Can you do that task to those conditions, to the standards? It's not black and white, right? You may be able to do it degraded, and if you have something adaptive, then you're able to do it. Changes conditions and standards, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. So that's when we started to think like, 2 binary 0, 1 doesn't work. So 0 to 10 does. And looking at how degraded are people and where in their life cycle is it most impactful. Interesting. This was all because we were trying to figure out if I'm standing in front of a room full of investors and they're like, great, Doug, I love the product. Why would I write a check? They have to know the market is big enough. When you start talking about disability in the form of a scale and that we're all going to get there. And in fact, we were all there when we were younger. So if you take a knife as an example, and you're doing a task, let's say it's cutting carrots, you could take that task and use our ability curve to look and say, okay, can people do that? It's more kitchen tasks, not specifically a carrot. But if you look at kids, a child does not have the strength, dexterity, or coordination to do things the way an adult can. They may have the cognitive ability to know what's safe and what's not safe. And you could trust them with a knife, but they just can't use a regular knife. They're disabled, right? There's no other way to define them in the context of that task. And when you start thinking that way, the market gets big. So for our knife, and I'm sure some people would say we stretch it, but the market's about 118 million people who don't have optimal strength, dexterity, and coordination in their upper extremities. Now, do you market to everybody the same way? No, but it's validation that there's a need to play in this white space, and there's a need to design smartly from an adaptive perspective, because not only is the market bigger, the big secret is adaptive products often have an applicability to people who would not otherwise be categorized as disabled. So adaptive design is better design. So what we try and think of is adaptive, assistive, adjacent. Because if we're talking from an assistive perspective, sometimes people say, okay, I get it. Like, I get tired cutting stuff. And if this makes me not tired, then even better. So I think it's just having the ability to connect with people where they're at, to have them understand that it's just an adaptive things are better. And the real irony is people are using adaptive things every day on their cell phone. They're using technology that helps their brain cannot do what it needs to do with keeping all the stimulation and stimulus straight. So what does that mean? They're using a app to be able to do that. They're adapting to the environment that they need. They don't look at it that way because they can work better, but they're not so impacted that they couldn't do certain things. But I would argue that they are. If you couldn't do all the tasks that you need to on a regular basis, and if those have been elevated by adaptive products like technology, then without them, you can't do it. So I think it's not just playing with definitions. I think it's people really understanding that's the human condition.
So if you've ever used the prediction type on your phone, where you start to type out a word and it gives you 3 options as to what you're typing, you've used adaptive technology.
Yeah. Oh, no.
That's what it was originally invented for.
Oh, totally. And I see it. It's like when you buy a car and you see that car everywhere. When you start thinking from a different perspective, then you understand that the features and benefits of many products are adaptive in nature. The hard part is then translating that, because people in the disabled community often don't look like the people who are making that definition of whether they will accept an adaptive product or not. But the interesting thing, as we've been trying to get investment or people interested in it, is if you were to look at degrees of separation, most people know somebody, they either are or they know somebody maybe with 2 degrees of separation at most who would benefit from adaptive products. Yet it is still very hard to find the right investors who look and say, this is a market where not only I can make money because no one's doing it, but that there is an impact that is better than just what the ROI is. And when I say that, they should have that connection. They should look and say, oh, wait a minute, I was a caretaker. So I was a caretaker for my dad. He passed away at 89. He obviously didn't have the strength, coordination, and dexterity that he did when he was younger. He was disabled, right? So if I had this knife and I can give it to a senior and they can have their independence, you are meeting a need in a certain way. Well, I would think there would be investors out there who would say, wow, huge, I love it. I was a caretaker. We're just not finding that. So we're hoping that we get some momentum, we get some visibility, we get hosts like you helping build awareness in the disabled community so that you all are able to also articulate how big a market you are.
That is, yes, we are such a big market that nobody.
Yeah, and if they could figure it out, then the disability tax goes away, right? The disability tax where you throw an ergonomic handle on a crappy knife and you charge twice the money
And then
for it.
you charge twice as much. Yes.
What we're hoping is smart design and mainstream adoption that you can, in a lot of ways, subsidize good design for the disabled community by wider adoption, right? It's now distributed amongst a broader group of people who are all buying this knife, and it drives down price. It creates economy of scale. And frankly, I think it also then creates further innovation, because then people start to look and say, well, wait a minute, if I design something right, I'm not just going to be limited to a very small market.
Yes, good design will always win, I think, if you put thoughtful design into it.
Well, when I were talking in the beginning, or before we started recording, about the innovation that is locked up in the disabled community. And if ever, I think second only to that are the privates that were under me in the Army who could make stuff, could fix a vehicle, which is very innovative with limited resources. Because of what we're talking about with a lack of commercialization, a lack of design, a lack of products, you've got a community that says, okay, what can I do with PVC and a pool noodle? Or how can I make something that allows me to do what tasks I need to do? NuLu is not our only product. I'm part of a company called Red Leg Innovation. NuLu is our first brand coming out of it. What we're really hoping is to find innovators in the disabled community, because the one thing that I have found I love about the disabled community is they tell you what they want.
Oh yeah.
And they will tell you, hey, this worked for me. This didn't. Like, if ever, it's like, wow, we have like R&D. And I frankly would love to find disabled innovators who have a great product idea that we can proof out and validate for commercialization, that we can help them bring it to market. Because I think there does need to be design and commercialization by the people who it helps for other people who it helps. It's just the right way to do it.
That is so true. And on that subject, I have had a crazy idea in my head, but I am not an engineer. I'm just a person who thinks of crazy stuff and is very creative. So one of the biggest hurdles for the disability community being able to be financially independent, come off these services, besides the crazy limits, which is a whole other podcast, is having to replace their chair every 5 years. So I'm like, what if it was like this robust, like TV, for lack of a better term, not the ones hiking, those are already out there, but like the robust, long-lasting chair that people could that has all the functions that my chair has, but people could easily replace parts themselves, and it could last for like 15 years.
No, I think I hear you. There's something out of a lot of veterans organizations, and one of them has this thing called the vet tank, and it's like a wheelchair with like tracks like a tank. Love that you think about that stuff. The thing that I always find it's a bummer is that there isn't a mechanism for that type of kind of specific ideation. There's a lot of stuff out there, but we're hoping to fill that need.
Yeah. And the market for the wheelchair would be so small, and it would have to start out so expensive, but
it might not. The question is, and this is one of the design things that we try and build in, is what already is there off the shelf, right? That's not necessarily a component of us being insightful more than anyone else, but it's a matter of the cost may not, like, you might not need the latest and greatest. So if there are features that are inherent to wheelchairs or other modes of mobility, that as they're getting more complex, are technology driven, that raises the cost. If it's just a mechanical component, there are sometimes very reasonable off the shelf types of solutions that can be put together for the kind of solution that you're talking about. And it is our vision that we find folks like you and say, okay, well, let's ideate here. Let's see how it works, or create some mechanism where they can submit ideas and we can start looking at those things, because for many in the disabled community, a product that produces, maybe they license it and it produces passive income, that's life-changing. because in my research, many in the disabled community, it's hard for them to succeed in private sector, and it then impacts their overall financial well-being.
Yeah. And like the most positive feedback you've gotten over this knife so far?
I gotta say, the most positive feedback was from people who don't need it, right? Because we knew that the needs-based community is going to look and go, totally get it, right? Like, we've sent it to a bunch of adaptive offices, or like, we get it. It's when somebody else picks it up and goes, oh, I get it. And then we're able to say, what's an adaptive knife? And we're able to draw that connection. So I think that's been the feedback that we cherish the most, is when certain assumptions are validated by discussions that we have with people.
Which is funny, hilarious that it's from people who don't need it, because the same people that are like, where's the market, when they get it, it's so much easier. They're like,
Right.
20 of these. It's so funny.
We've been wrestling with the marketing challenge of, if you've got like these markets and you've got people who say, hey, it looks cool, it works, I like it, I could take it camping, and it replaces a couple of knives, all that kind of stuff. It's hard to not have it where they look and go, oh, but it's adaptive, like, I don't need it. So the ability, I think, to put us in a situation where right now we're probably going to be having multiple marketing channels and messaging for that point. But I think as time goes on, that it will represent a broader market, and that feedback will be more consistent. One of the markets that we're actually focusing on is the sandwich generation, and I'm part of that, because
Explain what the sandwich generation is for our viewers.
The sandwich generation are people who are parenting and caretaking. So you're in this situation of, you still got kids at home, you're probably mid 40s to in the 50s, and then you've got parents who you're caretaking. And one of the places that we have found pretty good feedback is when people buy two of them. And they say, well, I got a 90-year-old mother who still likes to cook, and frankly, I think it'd be cool for me too. So I think that part of the market are the ones who represent that bridge, right? Granted, many who are in that sandwich generation do have osteoarthritis and some other things that could be problematic, but not enough that they're necessarily making buying decisions. But if they're thinking, hey, I bought one for mom or dad, and while I'm at it, that puts us in a really good light. And I think in some ways, I hope that we can get the children's market at some point and the adult market. And if we get those two bookends, then as kids get older, there won't be the center that is very much attached to a traditional knife from a paradigm perspective. And that would be the game changer, where everybody, and I hate that term, but where people look at it and they say, this is the only way to use a knife in the kitchen, because chefs learn to cut, right? So if you look at a chef, and I'm going to take this knife out again.
Go to YouTube if you want to see the visual.
Right.
Go to YouTube.
Well, I could talk. So I'm holding it up for the people on YouTube, but I'll explain. So if you look at a trained chef, they don't hold the handle in a way that you would think they would. They hold where the blade attaches to the handle, because what does it do? It gives them the force from their hand to the blade. This is balance because they're holding the knife. They're not holding it by the part that's weighted. So the problem becomes, people are really attached to this type of paradigm of using a knife. If we can break that stranglehold on people defining their identity in the kitchen by using a traditional knife shape, which is antiquated, then that's when we really take the market.
That's a really good point. How has your military service influenced the way you look at adaptive technology and all that?
Definitely the problem-solving side. On the West Point piece, we're all engineers. During the Army time, you're always problem-solving. So I think it was like, what's a really good, simple solution for this problem? I was definitely motivated by the disabled veteran community and a desire to potentially have a product that allowed my fellow brothers and sisters in arms who may have been injured the ability to do what they need to do in a manner that's suitable and suiting their service. But I think it also sometimes comes down to character and looking and saying there's a need here and we're going to keep doing this for a community that needs it because that's just what we do. The most veterans you talk to, their definition of service does not end when they hang up the uniform. I think it's especially true of academy grads. And this being part of this community, knowing that there are Americans who can benefit, makes me think that there is a duty to still do what you can to provide great impact. I was in lending for a long time, so it didn't necessarily shape how my full career has been. But as I'm coming into entrepreneurialism, design, and invention, it is a community that I think deserves the same type of everything that other communities do. And I think that sense of service keeps me grounded and focused on wanting to provide that.
Just tell us, like, what, besides what you've already covered, like, what feedback on the disability community you're getting?
The disabled community likes it, the ones that we've sent it to. There's a little learning curve. So they've been sometimes a little back and forth, and we've created a good instruction book. The one that blew me away, and actually we came up with some great design points. The disabled community said, get rid of the point right away. So this looked like a more traditional knife. They're like, and we were like, you don't need a point. So we got some great feedback that way. The feedback that blew me away the most was we were talking to an adaptive office, and there was a group of people.
Explain
and one of
what
them
an
said,
adaptive office is.
So every state has an adaptive office that is it's a point of information for adaptive products and services and things like that. And I ended up tripping upon that when I found out there really wasn't any community that looked at disabled products or I should say adaptive products and provided any kind of opinion. I think it was so distributed. And we found one office, and they were very generous. They're like, each state, as well as protectorates and everything, have an adaptive office. So we've been in
would that be like the Department of Aging and Rehabilitation here?
I believe so. Like, God, there was one, like ITAC was one of them, and it was like I don't remember what state it was. So each one is named different, but there was one site I went to that I had like all of them there. So we've been talking to those folks. We've been talking to disabled advocacy groups and all that. But we were talking to one office, and there were a couple of them sitting there on the Zoom call, and one said, you really should start exploring vision impaired. And one of my team's an attorney, right? And when we went back to him with that info, he's like, and there's some liability.
Like, we want to stay out of the courtroom.
Yeah, exactly. However, there are still people with visual disabilities, right? With vision impairments. They're using a knife. And it's not like we're saying that our knife is so completely safe that there's no chance for an accident. It's inherently a blade with a handle on it, so you could get cut. But what that person told us, and it's funny, I actually did blindfold myself. My vision is terrible, like for reading, I can use a knife. So I use reading glasses, but I blindfolded myself and I used it. And his argument was about control. So if you think about the play in your wrist and you're using a regular knife, a half inch, quarter inch on either side, you could cut yourself. And if you're cutting and your arm is moving around at all, that knife blade is potentially moving and it's not going where you think it is. With the NuLu, and I'm holding it up for the people who are only listening, because the force transfer is so direct, you know exactly where it's cutting. Now, could someone cut themselves with it? Yes. Is anecdotally something that we have found out that you will be less likely to cut yourself with our knife? Yes. And because you can use it in different types of grips, you are now not having to pick up different knives on the workspace. What that means is you're not exposing yourself to grabbing the wrong part of the knife. You're getting things done sooner. So what we really try to have is very much, there's a martial arts concept called the beginner's mind, where you go into things that you don't necessarily fully understand with a viewpoint of knowing nothing, so that you are open-minded and coachable and you can listen. We're trying to take that approach as much as we can, because if we were like, oh, we're not going to even touch the vision impaired, maybe not, but there might be someone who is vision impaired who wants to try it out, who can help us, right? I think it's just really understanding the wide applicability of it all.
Yeah. So there are these shoes, I'm wearing them right now, called Billy footwear, and they're made for people that wear braces, and they just zip and unzip. Like you zip them and
Right.
unzip them and they're off, and zip them and they're on. And I was talking to one of my caseworkers about them, and she has a daughter that's able-bodied, and she was like, "Oh my God, those would be so great for my daughter because she never wants to tie her shoes, so all she would have to do is zip them."
Oh,
So
totally.
that's an example of like adaptive stuff benefits
Hey,
everybody.
I would argue, and my marketing team and I had a debate about this one day. I would argue that Skechers are adaptive, right? Because if you look at Skechers, first thing, people like to say they're lazy, right? Oh, I'm lazy. I bought some Skechers because I don't want to have to tie my shoes or do whatever. But arguably, it's not laziness. It's, you know what? I am at a point now where I just don't like dealing with it enough that I'm going to buy shoes that slip on easy and slip off easy so that I don't have to deal with it. And a lot of times it's because of back issues, joint issues, and all that. Now, do they sell themselves as adaptive? No. But if you look at the commercials, a lot of times they're focused at an older crowd. They're focused on a lot of things. So there's people who are doing it right. And at one point there was the debate of like, should NuLu's marketing approach be Skechers type approach, right? It's something where it didn't go that way, but that's where I will say that there are some things that are inherently adaptive. You talking about the shoes that zip, it's similar. I remember when I was in the Army, one of the things that tankers had boots, the guys who rode around in tanks, they had boots that zipped up. And that was like, we were always jealous of them. Well, adaptive thing, because tying up combat boots got.
That's a good point too. So tell us about the Kickstarter campaign for this thing and how successful that was.
The Kickstarter, we ran October through December. And there's some funny things we got out of it because I had never done one and I had never bought anything on one, but it seemed a logical way to go. So the way we approached it was two ways. It was, let's raise money, but let's understand our market. So we intentionally did a longer one, and we had awareness weeks every week where we provided discounts where you announced the discounts applied throughout the Kickstarter, but to those different communities. So spinal injuries, MS, Parkinson's, cerebral palsy, all those different kinds of things. We used our Kickstarter, instead of saying, hey, this is a great night, we were saying, hey, this week we are going to talk about people with MS. And we had some posts that were relevant to that. And it went well. We hit our number. And I think in retrospect, it was a fine way to go. We had situations that didn't align with what were realistic maybe. But I think now when we're launching in April, we really have a good understanding about what that messaging should look like. And I think it also provides an ability for us when we work in the disabled communities, the advocacy groups and stuff. The one thing I found with those groups that's super interesting is, as open as they are, the stuff we've talked about with sharing ideas, and there's always a little suspicion too of like, are they carpetbagging, or are they working in this community to make money and we're never going to hear from them again, and things like that. And I think the more time that we spend in those communities and the time that we spend doing things that may not even just benefit us that much, right? Like providing a discount to people who have, the way we structured it was if people had made donations to advocacy groups or charities in support of the disabled community, we would provide a discount. And I would have liked it to go a little more viral, and I think we learned some things, but it was a good approach because I think it helped us understand those communities better. And when we go to sell, they can look back at our body of work to say, this wasn't just a short thing. They're really committed to our community.
Yeah, that's amazing that y'all did that too, like trying to like help the community out too. That's amazing.
Thank you.
So where do you see NuLu and other adaptive technology going in the future? We kind of touched on that, but
We already have a roadmap. So with NuLu, there's other versions. Some of our R&D is definitely in different handle types, because while you can, if you think of disability, manifestation of symptoms from a disability as similar, but not exactly the same. With our initial launch, we could say we can come up with the best of all worlds handle that more or less works for everybody. But in future designs, we want to come up with handles that work better specifically with different communities. People with MS have different needs than people with cerebral palsy. Is there something that we can make more targeted from a handle perspective for each of those communities that represents a better option for them? Now, because the handle is really in many ways the easiest part, because we're really working with injection molding and the blade is going to be identical,
yeah.
it doesn't really sap away from our economy of scale to do that. We're also looking at accessories, things, cutting boards, as an example, a cutting board that holds the food in place. There are other things that increase the benefit of the NuLu. And then, I don't know, again, other variations, one for sport, like out in the field, if you're a hunter or a camper, different ways that we can take the same patent pending design and broaden it for broader appeal. But that said, we really want to take this adaptive, assistive, adjacent approach. And as we learn things in the market and we build the relationships with the disabled advocacy community and all the folks who it'll take us 2, 3, 4 years to really build a good network, when we come up with another product, we don't have to spend 2, 3, 4 years. We can reach out to the communities that understand, trust us, know that we're not just carpetbagging and that we're in there to make a quick buck, and know that we're committed to that community. We can hopefully bring things to market more quickly. We don't know necessarily where the next huge product will come from. We have some great ideas, but as I said before, we're maybe hoping that the next big product comes out of the disabled communities that we serve now, and that we can work with them as a founder and resident, maybe get them in an accelerator where they can learn how to bring it to market, and we can use the same template to continually do that.
That's going to be amazing if you guys can put together a program like that. I cannot wait to see
I got a committed team, and
the products that come out of that.
well, and it's amazing. There are a lot of good accelerators, as an example, for things like disabled veterans and women. You don't hear it the same way in the disabled community. It might be just because not enough stuff of that has gotten in front of them, right? Because there just weren't enough people who were disabled who could get far enough. But I think those opportunities even exist now. And the great part about all this, it really does come down to the story. More and more you're hearing in the investment community, because I listen to a lot of podcasts about it because it's right in my face, trying to get this to market. You hear a lot about storytelling, a narrative, and a compelling story for the founder. And when you look at disabled people, whether it was a long disability that was from childhood or a disability that was picked up over time, either through an injury or a chronic condition being diagnosed, the stories are very compelling. And the ability to turn that into, frankly, what has gotten me on a lot of podcasts is they're like, wow, disabled vet, knife maker, all this kind of stuff, right? That people just like the story. And I just think you could tap into that, because you and I were talking in the green room about how just dang tough it is being disabled to live a normal life, no less rise above the average person who just has a normal job to bring something like a product to market. That kind of story, I think, would be really compelling. And it would connect with, as I said earlier, the people who have maybe a 1 or 2 degree separation with the people who are disabled, so that now people are just thinking in a different way.
Yeah. Example, my grandma used to love to cook. She can't get around anymore like she used to, but she's almost 90. She's 89. She'll be 90 in this upcoming December, and she would love something like this life, I think, because it would make it easier for her to cut stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. The elder community, senior community is a big part of it. And you asked earlier about bringing it to market and stuff. Part of it is once you have an idea, okay, where else does it apply? Then you look at old people, you look at young people. The senior market is a big part of it because their unique market in some of their degradation from a health perspective happens because they lose that independence in the kitchen. And then maybe you have to eat processed food. Maybe you have to go get fast food more often. And if you have to eat out or order in, it's more expensive. And if you're on a fixed budget, that's problematic.
Because that Social Security payment, even if you get paid the max, it's not that much.
No, absolutely. You're right. 100%. 100%.
Anything that you want to add?
Really just thank you for your support and would love if anybody is interested, if there are any in the disabled community like you who have a platform, we are looking for people to test the knife and get us feedback because there's no better awareness than somebody who has that platform, respects us, understands what we're trying to do, but also has a unique voice in their community. Anyone out there, please contact us because we would love to work with you.
And where can people contact you?
The best place is my email address, dkatz@goredleg.com. It's Go Redleg. If you can see, pointing the right way, wrong way there. That red right there, I'm not pointing too well. In that picture, I was in the artillery. Artillery is red, so that's why we're called Red Leg Innovation. So
and that's on your podcast, right? Or if not, you could just put it in the.
It is right, but they can also look me up. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I have my marketing team was kind and they gave me my own like pirate channel where my daughter and I, as an example, make videos cooking and things like that. So I have a big digital footprint. I will make sure that I get you my link tree. My link tree is the best thing for getting my information out.
I think I've got it. Is it Linktree/Doug Katz?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. So that is the best place because what I do try and put there is all my appearances. I have got white papers and articles that I have written about adaptive design, things like that. So that's the best place. That's a great product, I'll tell you.
That's a lifesaver right there.
It is. Put it this way. It's been an adaptive product for me to keep my life straight because there's just so much going on.
It's been an adaptive product for me to stay organized. I have 2 link trees, one for me and one for the podcast. And on my link tree, I put my guest appearances, and on the other link tree, I put anything having to do with the podcast or our advocacy or the website. So yeah, they've been amazing.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And it's just, it's way easier to manage. Even my LinkedIn just got out of date after like a couple of weeks when I started using Linktree, and I'm like, oh, I got to keep that up to date. So, but yeah, one thing I definitely want to leave people's mind with is that adaptive design is really smart design. It's smart in a lot of ways. It's just a better product, but it's better for us as a society to think in terms of that. It's about optimization. Put it this way, if you're conservative, adaptive design is great because you're conserving space, you're conserving energy, you're conserving a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. We will have all his links in the show notes, including his articles and everything. So be sure to go check those out. Be sure to get in contact with them if you would like to be ambassador for the knife, as I will be. And we will see you guys next episode. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Have a good one.
So I really love that one, and I hope you did too. Follow Doug on social media. We'll have all his links in the show notes to the incredible stuff he does. And we will have all the links to follow me on social media in the show notes as well. So be sure to do that. And we will see you guys next episode. Bye, guys.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to follow the show and our guests on social media and subscribe. Be sure to hit the bell so you'll get notified when we upload new episodes. See you next time.